You are listening to Inside Voices on WNHHLP 103.5 FM.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for Inside Voices. My name is Georgia Goldburn. I am the Director of Hope for New Haven and the co-founder of Circle. And I am thrilled, as always, to be joined by some of the most interesting people in childcare, in the childcare world in Connecticut. And this morning, we are going to be talking to some really, I think, wonderful people, at least for me, and I hope for many other folks, but definitely for me, some wonderful people from LISC. We have here with us this morning James Horan. And James, I want to get everybody's title properly, the Senior Executive Director of LISC, and Elizabeth Frazier, the Program Officer of LISC. And I want to welcome you guys. Welcome to Inside Voices.
Thanks for having us. We really appreciate the opportunity.
It's great to be here.
Right. So, James, I'm going to start off with you, and I'm going to give you an opportunity just to talk to our audience about what LISC is and just some of the work that you are doing in the childcare realm on behalf of the Office of Early Childhood.
Sure. Thanks, Georgia. We do appreciate the opportunity, appreciate all the good work that you do in the early childhood field and the opportunity to talk to your audience today about our work. So LISC is the Local Initiative Support Corporation. We are a national nonprofit organization based in New York City. We've been operating for a little over 45 years. Our office in Connecticut is one of 36 around the country. We operate statewide in Connecticut. Some of the other offices are for a single city or metro area like Los Angeles or Cincinnati, but in Connecticut, we are statewide. The core of LISC's work is that we're a community development financial institution, meaning that we're sort of like a nonprofit bank, providing funding, especially for nonprofits. Major focus of our work is around affordable housing development, but we also do other types of community development, including childcare facilities. I've been the executive director of LISC Connecticut for the past 7 years. And a few years ago, we were approached first by the Connecticut Health and Education Facilities Authority and then by the Office of Early Childhood about getting more involved in helping to fund childcare facilities in the state. LISC had previously operated a childcare facilities fund with the state of Connecticut from about 1999 to 2014. We were one of the leaders in the country at that time in having a childcare facilities fund. But eventually the funding for that initiative, which was primarily state funding, but there was also private funding from foundations, phased out. So we stopped doing work in that area, but we're really excited to get back involved with it again.
Okay, so you were approached by the Office of Early Child Education to manage funds on behalf of the state. And so, Liz, you are the primary person that's been doing that work. So talk to us about what those funds were, are, and will be.
Okay, and I'm Liz Fraser, and I am the program officer, one of the program officers at LISC, and my role is managing the Early Childhood Facilities Construction and Renovation Grant Program. So originally, the first program was funded by ARPA dollars that needed to be spent very quickly and out the door, and they were given to the Office of Early Childhood through the legislature to distribute to increase facilities, especially for infants and toddlers across Connecticut. As many of you know, infants and toddlers spaces for infants and toddlers in childcare are hard to find, and the Office of Early Childhood is really trying to take care of this issue. So the idea was to increase the capacity of spaces for infants and toddlers and for preschool in childcare deserts. We started this program in 2023. I think Jim and his crew did quite a bit of work before that to get the grant in place. But in 2023, my associates and I started this, my colleagues, and to get the program running. We were very surprised when we received 740 applications for support to either build a new facility, to expand their present facility, or to increase the quality of their programs and their facility space or playgrounds.
And Liz, how much did that 740 request amount to?
It was over $75 million in requests. We had 13 million to distribute. So as you can see, there was a really high need for this money. And, there wasn't as much to go around as one would hope. However, it was quite a substantial bit of money, and it did support 125 projects. We supported about 50, actually, we supported 50 center-based projects, and we supported 75 home-based family care, childcare projects as well. That includes one incubator, early childhood incubator project, which is a place where family home providers can learn and grow to have their own, in one space, to eventually have their own family home care in their own space, their own home. So that's where we started.
Okay.
Georgia, if I could jump in just to say too that although OEC approached us about applying, we had to go through a RFP process, a request for proposal process, from the State Office of Early Childhood to be selected as the entity to distribute these early childhood funds. So it wasn't just given to us, but was through an RFP process. And I'll say too that a big requirement for OEC with this initiative, with the ARPA funding, and the ARPA is the American Rescue Plan Act, federal funding that was made available to many states following COVID. They wanted to make sure that there was a strong equity component for this funding. So in addition to making sure that we were creating as many slots as possible for infants and toddlers because of the need there, there was also a desire that we make sure that it was family-based providers as well as center-based providers, and that there was an equity component, meaning that we would operate not only in childcare deserts, but in high SVI or social vulnerability index communities, which are generally communities with high rates of poverty. And they wanted to make sure that the funding would go to providers that traditionally had been excluded from opportunities to receive funding, whether it's through grants or even loans. And often those are Black and brown providers, which make up the core of a lot of the childcare providers in Connecticut and across the country.
And I want to say, in full disclosure, Hope for New Haven did apply for this grant funding, and we were awarded for our playground. And we have a beautiful facility out of that. And it has not only helped us to address the needs of the children, but also to really address the quality issue about our playground. So again, I just want to make that full disclosure to the audience. And I want to pick up on that about around that thought around equity, because Jim and Liz, I'm always the one making sure that that is an equity lens that we have. And I know that we have new grant funding coming up, and we are going to talk in more detail about that grant funding. But there are some concerns, major concerns that I have, and definitely Circle has, around how we are going to preserve equity in those funds. Can both you and Liz talk about how you're seeing equity especially in these current climate where, that word equity is now a pejorative. And so how are you internally as a leader, Jim, in this environment where your organization is doing some of these critical work, and Liz as a person who is really going to be in the trenches making sure that the vision and the implementation aligns. How do you envision this work going forward, especially with these upcoming funds?
Sure, I'll start, and then Liz will have more to say about this. But first of all, yeah, I mean, when you said equity, it's a word now that the federal administration does not want us to use. LISC, for example, has always been we're a community development financial institution, meaning that we were created in part to work in disinvested communities, and many of those communities are Black and Brown communities, the places where equity is needed. So that's been core to our mission over the decades. We were also found shortly after this administration took over, and the president issued a executive order against DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, to be in violation of that executive order. And HUD pulled, the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development pulled all of its funding from LISC, which was later restored. But still, because of that, we need to be very careful about the terminology that we use. And so LISC typically now talks about fair access in communities instead of using the word equity. But we certainly want to make sure that there is fair access and that there is funding flowing to the people and the communities that need it most. So we are definitely continuing to do that. And we still have a mandate from the Office of Early Childhood to do that with the new bond funds that we will be receiving, as well as in making sure that the ARPA funds were distributed that way. So the new funding is $7 million in state bond funds, which come with a whole different set of requirements compared to the ARPA funding. And in many ways, the state bond funds are not as flexible as the ARPA funds, where a primary goal was to get the money out into the community to make sure that the economic impacts of COVID were alleviated as much as possible. So the primary focus for the federal government was to get that money out quickly. For the state bond funds, a major need and desire of the state is to protect states' taxpayers and to make sure that the bond funding is used in such a way that protects that funding. That's understandable. We certainly want to be good stewards of money, whether it's from the federal government or from the state government, and to protect federal and Connecticut, national and Connecticut taxpayers in all of the work that we do. So with the bond funds compared to the ARPA funds, a major restriction that can be an impediment to getting some of the funding out is that there is a 10-year lien requirement, meaning that in order to receive funds as a grantee of the state funding, you need to have put a lien on your property for a 10-year period. So we've identified that as a challenge in order to ensure equity, because a lot of people don't own their properties. A lot of childcare providers don't own their properties and can't put a 10-year lien on it. If you are a renter, you need to go to your landlord. And we think it would be pretty difficult to get a landlord who would be willing to put a 10-year lien on his or her property when there's no guarantee that the child care provider will continue to be operating there, because very few people have a 10-year lease on their property. Mm-hmm. So in this round of bond funding, which is, as I said, $7 million in funds, a little over $5 million that will be going out to the community after funding for technical assistance and other purposes. This first round with bond funding is probably going to be mostly to center-based providers and centers that own their own property, so that the lien requirement is not an obstacle. Meanwhile, we've been working at the legislature to provide more flexibility for other funding that's going to be coming down the pike. So this $10 million, it was a $10 million allocation for bond funding, of which $7 million will come to LISC for this next round of funding. In addition, the legislature just this year approved $80 million over a 7-year period. And so we worked with Kate Farrar, the representative, Democratic representative from Connecticut, as well as with the Office of Early Childhood, to provide some flexibility for the use of these funds. And there is a little bit of flexibility, and Liz can get into more of that. But we think we'll probably need to go back to the legislature to create more flexibility going forward. And we've been looking at other states, including Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and what they do with state bond funds. And one thing that they've done is to require a long-term lease, but not to require a lien over a long period of time. And so that's something that we're going to try to go back to the legislature in this coming session. I will say it was a huge win to get $80 million over a 7-year period, combined with $15 million ARPA grant and the $7 million in state bond funding. I mean, this is really totaling a lot of funds that are very needed to create the additional childcare slots that are needed for both infants and toddlers and preschoolers. It's also tremendously helpful in terms of the health and safety requirements, and it's really going to be a great thing over a long period of time. And we're thrilled that Connecticut has taken the leadership coming from the governor, from the Office of Early Childhood, including former Commissioner Beth Bai, from legislators, including Kate Farrar and Mary Wieslander and others. I mean, to get this amount of funding and to have it over a period of time will allow us to create a real system that combines with other things that the governor and OEC and legislators are doing to create a system of care that works better for childcare providers, for the children in those homes, for the families. Really, it's a fantastic thing that's being done, and the facilities are one component of it. So sorry, I digressed a little bit, but wanted to get into some of those other issues as well.
Yeah. And I'm going to, and Jim and Liz, I'm always going to push on the level of investments and in the childcare system, because based on the number that Liz shared, and Liz, I'm gonna versus what we were allocated, there is still a long ways for us to go, but definitely wanting to recognize all that was done by the advocates. So Liz, Jim laid out his vision for Liz for how we're going to maintain fair access in this work. And when I hear where we're gonna focus on center-based programs, that already says to me it's not fair, because what about family childcare providers that own their homes? So again, talk to me about the practical application on the ground and why you made this decision as a list to do it this way, because there is a context, and I do know the context, and I want you to share the context so that people can hear it, so that when they hear only center-based programs will have access to this, then they have a bigger context.
Yes.
That being said, Liz, I'm going to push back on it, but go ahead and just talk about what this is going to look like. What is the application process going to look like for these upcoming funds, and how will that vary, from the initial application, and how that context of the first round kind of shaped the decision going into this round.
So, first of all, Georgia, you're always welcome to push back. That's how I learn, and we have wonderful conversations. So go for it. But let me put it into a larger context. There is $80 million of money coming. Mm-hmm. And we just went through 13 million, where we did support 75 family homes, and we wanted to make sure that we did that. In this round, because this doesn't have some of the stipulations in this funding that the 80 million has, and because we didn't really fund very, very, very large projects in this past round, they were medium-sized projects. Many folks would say they were small projects. The centers could receive up to $500,000, but most did not. There were only a couple that received that much money. Most received, several $100,000 or less, or some a bit more. But this round, then, we felt we needed to provide to those who really needed that money to finish projects up that had started. Programs, plus we wanted to get it out the door very quickly. We also want this money to be out the door and to learn about how bond money operates within LISC so that we can have a strong program down the road, hopefully with the other $80 million over 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two things then about the equity piece. And the first thing is Jim did an excellent description. There was one thing Jim missed that I just noted, is that the ARPA funds were reimbursable funds. Not reimbursable funds, they were beneficiary funds. In other words, they were given with an obligation to pay their contractors, with an obligation to pay for their furnishings and equipment. So they receive the funds into their bank account. Bond funding doesn't work that way. You have to have the cash on hand to pay out the contractors, to pay out the vendors that you're working with for furniture, fixtures, and equipment, or for playgrounds, or for whatever. And then LISC reimburses. And as you know, sometimes reimbursements can take a while. You have to get the right paperwork in, then it has to get sent out. And as you probably know from your experience, it can take a while to get the funds in your bank account. That doesn't really allow for folks who are operating on a shoestring, as we know family childcare providers are, to participate in projects like this. And so the bond funds, is going to be much more restrictive for folks because it is all reimbursement. We're not allowed to give money up front. It has to go in, it has to be accounted for. We have to have a contractor go inspect the work, make sure it's done correctly before any payments are made. It's a much more intensive program. What we found and what we think and feel and know is that it's not fair to put people in that position, and that what we need to start doing is thinking about the technical assistance folks need to get started on a project and to understand where they are, to not just in terms of their construction project or their expansion, but also in terms of their finances and where they are and how they can support that work. We also are looking into ways to support folks with bridge loans, and Jim can talk more about the lending part because I'm not a lender, but Jim knows more about that. But with bridge loans and other resources that folks can use in, when they don't have the resources up front, but they can have a loan to support those payments and then repay the loan when the money comes back from LISC.
Well, that's important, Liz, because that is a big part of the concern that I have about how this is going to be done. And I guess, I'm just as ignorant as everybody else out there listening to this conversation, because I'm thinking, well, if I have $1 million to do a project, why would I need bond funding other than using other people's money to do it? But again, if I have $500,000 or $1 million to do a project, then that says that I am in a particular situation to be able to do this work on my own. And so again, going back to the equity question or the equity lens and the equity concern, then that would not signal necessarily to me, maybe to somebody else, that this would be a person that, if we are talking about equity in disinvested communities, that organization would target. So can you explain a little bit more about people having access to loans and having those funds being able to pay back the loan?
Yeah, so let me jump in there,
Jim's
Georgia.
good with that.
Well, so we'll see. But Georgia, first, I will say we do definitely appreciate you always advocating for the family child care providers, home-based providers, as well as for equity, because it is important, and it's important to hold us accountable for what we say we're going to do. And in that first round, in the ARPA round of funding, as Liz said, we made 75 grants to home-based childcare providers, 50 to center-based providers, but not for the largest centers. For this $7 million in bond funding that we're receiving, there is a focus on the larger funders, which were kind of excluded from that first round, and also are in a better position to receive the funding and get it on only a reimbursable basis because they are larger providers. They're more likely to have credit or be able to get credit, and be able to get a loan from a bank or other source for the funding. Meanwhile, because there is this $80 million coming down the pike, we are working to figure out how we can work more with smaller providers so that as there was a set aside, $3 million out of the $13 million went to home-based providers for the ARPA funds. So we want to have similar set asides going forward with that $80 million. And the way to do that is for us to help figure out the financing so that even though the providers will have to get reimbursed, they'll be able to move forward with the projects. We're actually having a meeting next month, I believe it is, a first meeting to help figure out how we would do that financing. So we're going to bring together other community development financial institutions, which I said are kind of like nonprofit banks and are interested. Banks themselves, Liberty Bank in particular, has said that they're interested in speaking with us. We're also speaking with SIP, which is Social Impact Partners, which is really which has a lot of connections in the finance world and wants to make sure that everybody has access to this funding. So we're going to be bringing together different groups to help figure out the financing going forward so that we can make sure that everybody has access to this. And I hear what you're saying. Gosh, when you say that this $7 million round is going to go mostly to big center-based providers, that seems pretty exclusive. That may be true in some ways, but we got to get our feet wet with the bonding funds, understand how they work because the requirements are so different. But we're really preparing ourselves for the long term with the 80 million. It's possible there may be a few centers, a few home-based providers that receive funding from this round. One concession that legislators did win in this past session of the legislature is a waiver of the bond requirement that we mentioned, the bond funding lien requirement. There's a waiver for up to $50,000. Now, $50,000 is really small, but it could be enough for furniture, fixtures, and equipment, or some very small scale projects. So we may be able to have some of them with the 7 million, and even beyond the $7 million in bond funding. Certainly it will apply, or we hope that it will apply to the other $80 million in funding, but we'd like to either get a higher waiver or a lease requirement that you just have to have a long-term lease in order to get the bond funds. So that's how we're going to create equity, but it's a longer-term play because we didn't get everything that we wanted in this session of the legislature. So we're very mindful of it. It's just we can't do everything at once, and it's going to take a little bit more time. We do have support from OEC and from legislators who understand the importance of this issue, but they're up against long-term bond requirements that are just built into the law and that we weren't able to change in the 2025 session, but we're going to go back in 2026 and try to get some changes.
So you both mentioned that this is targeted towards a larger center, and I know you basically say there may be opportunities for family childcare providers. But so talk to us about when you say large centers, what does that mean?
It's not just being a large center. You could be a medium-sized center as well. But what you have to have is a project that is prepared. Is closer to being prepared. Shovel ready is what the terminology is, meaning that all of your site work has been done, mostly that you have a place that you have secured, that you're not still looking for a place, that it's secured, that you've looked into what it will need, that you've talked to the town planning and zoning to see that that the requirements have been met for the zoning, and that you'll be able to get a permit in place for your project, that any environmental issues are either taken care of or they're known environmental issues. Some of this means that the money from the organization itself has to go into it to start this work. So you have to have some resources. But what we find is that even though you think that 500,000, not you particularly, but in general, one might think that 500 or $1 million is enough for a project. Sometimes it's really not. And you just need that extra bit of funding to make the project work. So this is particularly for shovel-ready projects. They need to be, organized. There needs to be a budget in place. Contractors need to be not necessarily hired, but have been vetted, thinking about who might want to be hired. These are projects that what we don't want is to have a person in place that won't be able to finish this project because of the requirements, how long it takes to get permits, how long it takes to do that initial pre-site work.
So then, is it better to say, and I'm not going to try to police your language, that because all I keep hearing is bigger centers. And so in my mind, I'm thinking about a program like a CLC, I'm thinking about Alliance, I'm thinking about those types of programs are the programs that are being targeted. So is it better for us to hear that you are looking to create a large center, like a center with like 100 kids or 200 kids? So is it better for all of us to hear that regardless of the size of the center, that these things need to be in place?
Yes, that is absolutely right, that they need to be in place, but the projects must be needing between 250,000 and $1 million. Those are that's what we're considering large. And actually in the world of construction, that's not large at all.
Yeah. That wouldn't be the full financing for these centers.
Right.
I mean, that's the grant amount that would go in,
right.
But there presumably is a larger budget, and they're going to be getting, they either have equity through the organization already, or they'll be receiving loans or other grants that would make it possible to create these larger centers. I just want to mention.
Go ahead, Liz. Go ahead. I had forgotten to mention also that our grant requires, part of the reasoning that I neglected to say before is that our grant from the Office of Early Childhood, the one deliverable or two deliverables that we have is to increase infant, toddler, and preschool access as much as we can. That doesn't always happen in smaller programs. So again, we're looking at not large programs, but those programs that can increase capacity as much as they can, and that they're ready to go. So I just wanted to make that clear as well. And the other is childcare deserts, is to start, And
I'm going to circle back.
I'm sorry, Jim. Yeah.
No. I'm going to circle back to the childcare desert after Jim make his statement.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say too that part of what we're looking to do with this next round of funding is also to create a longer term pipeline of projects, so that, again, knowing that there's $80 million and also knowing what other states have done, like LISC has done a lot of this work, for example, in Rhode Island over a long period of time. And they have a pipeline and they know what projects are coming along, and then they create the technical assistance and support that is needed over the long term, so that, yes, this round of $7 million will be funding projects that are shovel ready, but with the application process, we expect to get a lot of projects in who will apply, who won't receive funding this time around, but can receive funding over time, and maybe they'll be smaller projects or other projects, but we'll get them in the door. Yeah, so that's just a point I wanted to make, but I'll go back to you, Georgia.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
To piggyback on Jim, there's a lot to this, and I feel like I want to make sure I get it in so that people
Fine, that
understand.
we can invite you guys back, so don't feel like we only
Okay.
have an hour, and I'm gonna be bothering you all to come back and have this conversation.
Well, we always try to make it as easy as possible to apply. This grant will be very different than the ARPA grant in terms of application. This time, we don't want to confuse people by having 740 applications for funding that will not be available. So what we have is an eligibility survey. And if you're not eligible, or even if you don't think you're eligible, we are really requesting people to fill it out to show that you're not eligible so we can keep track of that data. And then it will take you to a survey for what technical assistance you would need. How far along are you in your project? What would you need to get your project going? So we have an idea of how we can support folks down the road with that type of information. If you are eligible, you're only filling out a pre-application. We only have 8 to 10 grants to give this time. 8 to 10, we had 125 the last round. So we're doing a pre-application, and we're going to be giving technical assistance to all those people, to 50 of those, the top 50 applicants, to make sure their projects are ready to go when they get the money. So if they're not quite shovel ready, it's okay. We're going to be giving like 2 months for folks to get technical assistance, to get assistance from LISC and from Women's Business Development Council, to get both financial records, because everyone has to go through a required financial analysis in this grant. In the last grant, that was not the case. I mean, they had to have some financials in, but we were able to make some accommodations for folks who didn't have financials that were strong enough. In this case, we will help folks to get them strong enough to get through the review. We will also help with any, if they have zoning issues, or if they're not sure what to do next, or they have a contractor issue, we can give the assistance for those pieces as well. So that in the end, out of those 50, after the pre-application, we might get 100, 50 will be chosen. They'll have 2 months to get their projects together with help. There'll be site visits. Then they will be chosen. And 8 to 10 will be chosen, with the rest very close to being ready to get another grant, hopefully when the next money is released, so that it can be start the pipeline.
All right. So we mentioned Chalker Desert often in the conversations that we have with lots of folks. And, within the context of this conversation that we're going to have, because you all did a statewide survey, and part of the work I imagine that you were looking was to understand what the needs for facilities were and where facilities need to be. And when we talk about childcare desert, we talk about, places where childcare isn't available or accessible to families. So, talk to me about what you learned about not only just the lay of the land in Connecticut, but more specifically about childcare deserts as a part of this facility survey.
Yes, Jim, do you want me to start on this one?
Yeah, please.
Anything? So one of the things we noticed right away from our ARPA grant is that we received fewer applications from folks in rural areas, or anyone in rural areas, than we did from our cities and our urban rings around those cities. But when you look at the map of folks, of the centers, and you look at the map of folks who applied, many applied from the urban rings and urban centers. Very few responses did we receive from rural areas, which right away is sort of a red flag. Like, why is this? Why are people not applying? Well, part of it is there are fewer children and fewer places. Part of it we found was some of the folks that actually did get a grant in those areas did not want to apply to receive their grant because the zoning, they just couldn't get through the zoning departments in their towns for one reason or another. Another wanted to become a group home and realized that unless she could go up to 12 right away, and she didn't have room, I think, for 12, there was some issue there. They weren't going to make any money on that, and it was going to be just a lot of money spent for not a good reason. So there was different reasons. So we ended up with very few projects in the rural areas. And I know that there are committees and folks working on those issues now, but we really need to start thinking of different solutions for those areas, different models that we can use to help support the folks in those areas with the type of care that they actually need. So that I think that the cities certainly still need more.
Was that a catalyst for the whole landscape survey, or was there a different reason for LIST to do that?
That was part of our contract with the Office of Early Childhood, is to do a facilities study on what the needs of facilities are. So it wasn't just the landscape of where and what, but it was also what shape are facilities in. And from a survey that we did in that, let me see if I can find some of the data, we really did find that many of the programs needed renovations, not just extensions of their programs, but these are older buildings that were maybe 25, 50 years old. They had doors that were not working, gates and play yards that were not of high quality, that they needed renovations for roofs or for paving or all sorts of things that were really not covered by a grant that was implemented to increase capacity. So we found also that I would say that there are certain folks in the early childhood world that have more resources than others to actually pay for their updates and renovations and just maintenance on their buildings. But we found that 78% of both family and center-based providers did not needed some sort of renovation. Only 23% had any money at all of all centers, including those that did have money. Only 23% had the funds to actually do those repairs, to have a maintenance budget, and to pay for upgrades.
Well, let me clarify that number. Found that 78% of the folks who participated in the survey needed facility repairs, but only 23% had funds.
Yes. 78% needed quality upgrades of centers, and 78 needed health and safety upgrades. And only 23% actually had 22% of nonprofits, 4% of nonprofit centers that were part of a larger organization, 16% of, this is interesting, for-profit centers that were just single centers, only 16% had that. It was and this is where you're getting to the large centers. It was the large centers, but mostly those that were networks of centers that seemed to have the most ability to pay for renovations. Not that they all did. I want to make that clear, that some of them were hurting as well. But for the most part, many of the 62% had some funds available. So,
all right. So I think because you have been in this work, and Jim, you mentioned that LISC was in this work some many years ago around facilities. So some of those findings was, I'm sure, not surprising to you. So talk to me about what you both of you found very surprising from this survey.
Well, I think that the 78% needing renovations or needing health and safety improvements was higher than we anticipated. And certainly, we also had a tremendous number of responses to that survey, as well as a tremendous number of applications in the first place. And all of that, perhaps in some ways is not surprising, but it does speak to the enormous need, and I think was instrumental in helping to get the legislature to approve the $80 million in bond funding over this longer period of time, and that it goes along with other positive changes that took place in this last legislative session to look at how to improve the overall system over time. So that's the good news. But the bad news, if you will, perhaps from the perspective of legislators more so than the perspective of providers, is that it can't just be about expanding the number of slots. It also has to be about improving the existing facilities. And something that Liz didn't mention, but it was another finding from the survey is, well, no, Liz did mention this, that many of the providers, whether center-based or home-based, are in old facilities. And so they need those renovations. And that's where a lot of the funding over the next 7 years is going to have to go to renovating as well as to expanding. This is mixing up different sources of information, but a finding that we had from this first round with ARPA funding, because we did a survey of all the folks that received grants, and just about everybody responded. Like we got 117 or 118 responses out of the 125 grants, but the average cost per slot was only about $10,000 or $12,000, which is really reasonable and low. And that was a surprise to me, like how low that cost was. And I don't know that we can
When you
keep that
say
up.
cost, are you saying what people are charging?
No. Sorry, the $10,000 or $12,000. It was like that overall. There were about, just to make it simple with the math, there were about 1,300 new slots created with $13 million. So the average cost per new slot to create a new slot was about $10,000. And we've done some checking, like in other states, and in some cases the cost was like $50,000 per slot. But I think that was in part because providers put a lot of their own funding in to make this work. So
That's right.
as we go forward, like we're trying to figure out, okay, how do we sustain, if it's possible to sustain that low cost while still creating new slots, but we also know that we need to look at improving the facilities and making them sustainable for the long term. So there's a lot of factors to balance in all of this, and we are getting into the weeds with some of it, but it just, like all of these results make you think, okay, how do we move forward in a way that is going to be best for the children themselves that will be served, for parents, for providers, for both home-based providers and center-based providers, for the state overall with its economy, which is another reason why the state is investing, because they're looking both at the needs of families and children, but they're also looking at the economy and how we ensure that parents are able to go to work, et cetera. So there's many factors to consider in all of this, which is exciting that we have this opportunity, because for a long time, it was sort of like, oh man, what are we going to do? There's not money, there's not a system, there's not a plan. Now those things are all coming together, and it's an opportunity to work with everybody and to really engage all of the players in this landscape, to determine how we move forward in a way that serves everybody.
So I want to take a pause right there because we only have a few minutes left. And again, as I said, we are definitely going to invite you all back to talk in more detail about the survey that you did, because there's going to be additional work, obviously. And as we get close to the legislative session, there's going to be lots of activities there. But I want to take this time to create space for you to give information to folks about how to find out more about this upcoming grant fund and how they can apply. And Liz, you kind of broke it down a little bit about the fact that you're going to do a survey first and then it's going to take you to another survey. So can you just share with the audience in the next like couple of minutes where they can go to find information about this grant fund?
Yes, we've been sharing information on the early childhood listserv, but we also have it on our website, and there will be more information coming on the website as we put it together. The website is ctbuildschildcare.org. That's pretty simple. ctbuildschildcare.org. And you can find information there. There's also contact information there. You're welcome to contact me, and I can put that in the chat as soon as I can go back to finding you. Hold on.
I don't know how it would show up in the
I
chat.
lost. Oh, you don't have a chat. Okay. Then my information is on there as well. So that's all set. And oops, hold on just a second. I just lost you all here. Hold on.
That's okay. We can see you and hear you.
Oh, you can see me. Good. So I'm just going to keep talking, even though I can't see you. The other thing I think that is really important, though, just because we have only a few minutes, it's really important to just apply for this grant through the eligibility survey and put down what you need in terms of support for putting a project together or completing a project. It's just really important to do that. And that way we know what's going on. It adds to our database of information that we share with the Office of Early Childhood as well. So I think that that is something I would ask you to do. And then the other piece of this is that it's really important as we go forward to understand that what we also found was a lot of the folks that finished a project, that were done, completed, out of the woods, their project is closed with the ARPA money. They were really, really very happy, but many of them still have problems with just operational support and operational money. It's really important that we continue to push for a system of early care in the state that supports everybody, that supports families, centers, large facilities, small facilities as well. And it's really important that facilities are a part of that system of care. It's not that it's facilities over operational support. It has to all work together in order to truly be a system. There has to be enough supply, have to be enough spaces. Programs need to be of high quality. That means high quality spaces, and children and parents need to have access to these places. So it's not just one thing or another. It's really looking at this as a system of care.
So Liz, you preempted my final question or statement. I'm hearing your final thoughts. So Jim, I'm going to give you an opportunity to share what would your final thoughts be around this conversation.
Yeah, so I think in a way, like you said, this is not the final conversation. This is not the final thing. This is going to be ongoing, and we are really excited at LISC to be working on these childcare facilities, but it's part of a bigger system. And so what we want to do is make sure that we're continuing to advocate with probably many of your listeners, with folks from the Early Childhood Alliance and Childcare for CT's Future and the union and others, to make sure that we have a system that really functions for everybody. Because when we can meet the needs of all families and all children, it's going to make everybody better off in the state. So that's where this is going. This is a long-term play, and we're thrilled to be a part of it and to talk with you and to work with lots of providers as we go forward.
And Jim, you mentioned that you are a CDFI, and so I'm pretty sure that is language that's going to be coming up as lots more people are doing this work. And so how can people find more information about LISC if they're
Sure.
looking?
Yeah. So, check out our website. If you just look up LISC Connecticut on, Google or whatever search, you'll find us. And look at our website and see the different work that we're doing. Liz mentioned the early childhood website specifically. Liz, you want to repeat that address?
Our early childhood website is CT Connecticut, CT buildschildcare.org. CT buildschildcare.org.
And we'll definitely blast that out in our social media as well as we're promoting this.
That
So,
Thank
sounds
you.
sweet.
um,
Georgia, I'll send you some information later that you can also send out to your group.
absolutely. And I once again, it's interesting that you said that the 75% of facilities needing repair surprised you, Jim, because it actually doesn't surprise me, but I'm also a childcare provider. And I get calls all the time or text message from random folks saying that they need childcare facilities funds. So we are so grateful for LISC and the work that you guys are doing. And again, we are going to make sure that folks have your information both for LISC and for the early care funds. And with that, I just want to thank you guys again for joining us. And I look forward to bringing you guys back in to have a conversation with us. All right. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much,
Thank
Georgia.
you
We
so much,
appreciate it.
Georgia. We'll be talking.
We'll definitely be talking. I'm going to be pushing back always.